Too. So there we go. There's the kind of the ground rules of what you need to know about these eras. Now we're going to get going. Why is this slide green, you guys? Yeah, why do we call the very first, the earliest, longest, 250,000-year-long era of human history the green era? Agriculture. That's right. So we're going to take a look at this earliest era, the longest and yet the shortest, in the sense that this is the one that they expect you to know the least about. Again, this is all the way up to 600 BCE. The College Board calls it the era of technological and environmental transformations, which does kind of make sense because farming is a big technological and environmental transformation. And I'm going to kind of to show you here too the two eras I'm presenting on have three key concepts. These are like the three big ideas about the era that the College Board wants you to know about. And by the way, this is the kind of stuff that you should be thinking of, these three big stories, when you write what part of both of your essays? Yeah, this is like the good stuff for contextualization often, because it'll often relate to these key concepts. Here's the first one. Throughout the Paleolithic era, this is a very long time period, 250,000 years or so before 900 BCE, humans developed sophisticated technologies and adapted to different geographical environments as they migrated from Africa to Eurasia, Australasia, and the Americas. There's an amazing story of how we became the only species that's adapted through our own culture and technology and intelligence to be able to live in every region of the world except Antarctica. So I kind of thumbnail this as human adaptation and migration throughout the Earth. Let's take a look at this. Here's our map here. Here's our origins in East Africa, although there are human remains nearly as old in North Africa, so maybe there's another story to unfold in our understanding of history in the future. But what's that thing called where like you use new information and reassess what we think we know about the past? Historiography, and there will of course be historiography questions on the exam asking you what does this evidence help us know about the past, so that's kind of key. How did we do this? How did we populate the entirety of the Earth by the year 15,000 BCE or so? Well, for one thing, we learned how to make tools. Humans are pretty smart about using stones, bones, other things, parts of animals, things in the environment to make tools, to manipulate our environment. That's a smart thing that we've been doing for 250,000 years or so. We learned how to control fire, and there's no evidence that any other species can do this. And controlling fire is really nice, because what can it do for us? It can cook food and make it more digestible to our actually herbivore type stomachs. What else can fire do for us? It's super useful. It can keep us warm if we move into northern colder or southern colder climates away from the equator. What else is it going to do for us? It can burn forests, which means we can plant stuff there. Or actually even gather crops that grow there, or plants that grow there after the forest is burned. That's kind of key too. So lots of things we can do with fire. And we adapted our cultural patterns. One of our early cultural patterns that's been really valuable, of course, has been the ability to talk to each other, to make sounds out of our mouths that have intelligible, abstract meaning. And that's good because that makes it a lot easier to survive in other environments, right, with all kinds of dangers and threats. Because instead of just going like, ah, we can be like, watch out, there's a woolly mammoth behind you. And that helps other people to know how to stay safe in all kinds of environments. So that's good. How else did we do it? Well, keep in mind, like these people here from this Algerian cave painting from about 60,000 BCE, we lived in small groups most of the time back in these days, which structured our social, who we marry, our economic, how we know where to get the good plants and where to find and track the good animals in the environment, and political, who decides what we're going to do as group life. Right? Small groups, humans lived in small groups. And those small groups, of course, often interact with each other, exchanging people, right? Because you can't just marry the same people from the same clan over and over again. You got to marry some new people from another band. And ideas, hey, check this out. If you strike these two stones together, it makes a spark, and you can start a fire more easily. And goods, I got some fur, what you got? Dried salmon? Okay, let's trade with each other in these small groups. That's what humans did for hundreds of thousands of years in the Paleolithic era. And Sedentarism, meaning what? Yeah, settling down in one place instead of being nomadic. And agriculture, while others pursued hunter-forager or pastoralist lifestyles. Different pathways that had significant social and demographic ramifications. Demographic, that means what? The study of populations. How many people, where they live, who they are, that kind of thing. Demographics was a word I noticed tricked people up on the short answer question of the practice exam, so make sure you know demographics, study of populations. This is basically the key concept about the Neolithic Revolution, which we sometimes call the Agricultural Revolution, and sometimes just call agriculturalization. A big turning point in human history. So let's take a look at this, how this happened. Two new ways of life emerged for humans about 10,000 years ago. So now we're keeping score. There's actually 3 lifestyles that humans followed for the last 10,000 years or so. Some people are still what? Hunter-gatherers. Some people are still nomadic hunter-foragers today. There's not many of them, but they're still there. The Inuit, technically, for example, in northern North America. And then some people are what? Pastoralists. And again, there's not that many of those people left on Earth today, but there still are some. The Maasai of Kenya, for example. But most of us are what? Farmers. Or rather, we live off of farming. That's how you probably got your breakfast today. Probably very few of you hunted a squirrel on Bull Creek Parkway this morning for breakfast. You probably ate some agricultural products. And so 2 new ways of life that rather quickly most humans adopt and keep for the subsequent 10,000 years. Pastoralism, this is the one I think that, at least in my class, I don't pay enough attention to, so we're going to pay some attention to it here, pastoralism, this way of life that developed in the Afro-Eurasian grasslands, look at those grasslands, affecting the environment in a variety of ways. Important note, no pastoralism in the Americas until after the Columbian Exchange. Why not?
No animals.
Yeah, no large, I mean there are animals, but they just happen not to be ones that domesticate easily, right? Like, good luck domesticating a buffalo. Like, seriously, good luck. So this is really where there are things like cows, sheep, and goats, and camels that can be easily domesticated. You're also not going to have much luck domesticating a kangaroo. You're just not. So that's pretty key. But agriculture, this is the one that probably has the biggest impact, this 3rd new way of life. There's our map of where in the world agriculture began first, and this is something I do want you to know about, where agriculture began. It's kind of a mystery. Why spontaneously about 10,000 years ago in these widely separated parts of the world, why did spontaneously people begin farming? Kind of the best theory I've heard, but it still leaves a lot unexplained, is climate change. You know, the climate kind of, one theory is the climate kind of cooled off a little bit and food supplies were unreliable, so people had to think a little bit more about how they would get their food and be more deliberate about it in various parts of the world. But good to remember, where did this happen? First in Mesopotamia, then in the Nile River Valley. Sub-Saharan Africa also developed, especially the Sahel region, south of the Sahara Desert, developed farming of certain crops early on. There and there, for example. Let's remember the Indus River Valley there, with its domesticated cattle, for example. Let's remember, they want you to remember the Yellow River or Huanghe Valley. What was the big early crop there? Anyone remember? Not rice, that was later. No love for millet. Dang. If you're hungry, your stomach needs to fill it. So go get yourself a bowl of millet. That'll kill it. Let's see, Papua New Guinea, taro root is cultivated there on purpose, and in the Americas too. Mesoamerica, maize is developed, and the Andes, potatoes, yay! No hash browns without potatoes, so that's good. How did we do this? How did we make this transition to agriculture? Well, for one thing, we obviously domesticated locally available plants and animals, and as Jared Diamond would like to point out, so it was definitely a geographic advantage to those people who developed agriculture in places with advantageous crops. So, you know, the kind of einkorn wheat, wild wheat that you can domesticate in Mesopotamia, for example, or teotzinte, which is actually kind of a form of grass, which was bred into maize in Mesoamerica. People had to work with what they had, and in some places like Papua New Guinea, what they had wasn't that great, wasn't that nutritious. Taro root has some calories, but no protein. So, you know, although they had agriculturalization there, it didn't support large populations like it did in the Middle East or Mesoamerica. People in these agricultural communities had to work cooperatively. They had to work together. It's a lot of work to farm. You have to clear the land, and sometimes you can just clear the land by setting the forest on fire, but other times it's a lot of work. And water control systems. I mean, if your field floods, that's bad. So you got to control the water to keep the floods out of your fields. But if there's not enough water in your field and your crops dry out, that's bad. So in some places you have to put in ditches like this one in Mesopotamia today in present-day Iraq to bring water from the river to your crops. It's a lot of work to do farming, so you got to work together. And of course, when you're done transforming land into farm fields, it's a lot less diverse, right? Where you used to maybe have like 15 different kinds of grasses and 14 different kinds of trees, you'd have one kind of millet, and that's it in the field, right? So less biological diversity and a drastic impact on the environment where farming occurred. Big changes to the environment. Let's see, how else did we, effects. Well, more food means more people. Look at this thing. This is called the Standard of Ur. This is a piece of art that's like 5,000 years old from Mesopotamia, from the city-state of Ur. Look at all those people there. They're not doing anything. How can you afford to have so many people who are just standing around without starving to death? Oh, you have agriculture. More food equals more people. And if you have more people who don't need to produce food, then you can have more specialization, can't you? People who do jobs other than getting food, like being warriors, like these guys down here, or making artistic stuff, like the people who made this lapis lazuli inlaid panel here, the Standard of Ur that we're looking at right here. Look, military elites. Patriarchy, of course, because as hunting and gathering, or foraging and hunting, which actually was a job done pretty successfully by women. It was often women in a society who would go out and find most of the food. That changes with farming, and farm work tends to favor men more, so patriarchy is a generalized pattern of agricultural and pastoralism. New technology, do you see any new technologies in that Standard of Ur? Oh, look at those wheels up there on that chariot used for trade and transportation. And they have to have some kind of new technology to hook up the horse to that thing. So, people who have more time on their hands because they're not just trying to hunt and gather all the time, perhaps that's why they are able to invent new technologies. And some of those new technologies, like plows, for example, make food production even easier, and that results in even more food, and that results in this whole cycle going on and on. More people, more specialization, more patriarchy. There's a handy new technology that was invented. What is it? Pottery, right? Because now you can put your food somewhere, and maybe the rats won't eat it, and it won't get all wet, so that's nice. Or you can just put it in your grave when you bury people, because they need it in the afterlife. Pottery, yes, key technology. And we come to our third. Now, our third big story of the Green Era here, the appearance of the first urban societies around 3000 BCE laid the foundations for the development of complex civilizations. In a nutshell, we're talking about the first wave civilizations. The first societies that develop that kind of lifestyle that does involve urbanization, people living in towns and cities, that involves formal institutions like official governments and official religions and that kind of thing, record keeping, writing, that is, job specialization, and all the other things that we have even to this day in our complex societies. And I think they really want you to know that they want you to remember the locations of some of the key first wave civilizations. And surprise, surprise, these are all emerging in places where there's also what? Not a river necessarily. Olmecs don't have rivers. Well, they have some, but they're not very big. Well, yeah, but obviously there's lots of places that have water that... Thank you, agriculture. These are all places with agriculture. So remember, they want you to remember Mesopotamian civilization, probably the first, in the Tigris and Euphrates river valleys, in the Nile River Valley, early Egyptian civilization before 600 BCE. They want you to remember Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, the Indus River Valley civilizations, and those are just a couple of the key city-states of the Indus River Valley civilization. They want you to remember that. They want you to remember the Shang civilization, early China, in the Yellow River or Huanghe River Valley. These are all river valleys so far, not so much in the Americas. Not the big river valleys in the Americas are not where civilizations developed, not in the Amazon, not in the Mississippi River Valley yet, but the Olmecs Olmecs in Mesoamerica. You remember how you can remember that the Olmecs is the oldest civilization in Mesoamerica? They're the oldest Mexicans. And Chavín in the Andes there. So the early first wave civilizations. And the first states, really, if we look chronologically, were Mesopotamia and the Nile River Valley. States, of course, the system where a formal government controls a fixed set of territory. That's a state. Remember that. That's kind of a key concept. Powerful new systems of rule that mobilize surplus labor and resources over large areas. And we kind of look back at Egypt and we're like, well, it's not that big of an area, but compared to like village-based societies, that 300-mile stretch of the Nile River Valley, that's a large area for one person to control or one government to control using the surplus labor, people who don't have to produce food, so they can be things like scribes and send letters to other parts of the kingdom saying, pay your taxes. Still, you owe us your taxes. Come on, pay your taxes, that kind of thing. And control resources, like the extra grain that would then go to support the bureaucrats and that kind of thing. Rulers often claimed divine power. This is pretty true that as far as we know, all early civilizations were theocratic in some way, meaning that the rulers were somehow linked to religion or the divine. So keep that in mind. What's that pharaoh going to claim to be? Let's see. Oh, he's actually the god Osiris. How about that? Right there on earth with you. Better do what he says. He controls the underworld. And rulers relied on the support of military, religious, and or aristocratic elites, right? The locals who control the land, they need their support, the aristocrats. The military obviously needed the pharaohs, the kings of Mesopotamian city-states, the early Shang emperors in China. They need the support of the military. And the religious elites. If people are going to believe that this dude's actually the god Osiris, they need a bunch of priests around to say, yep, he really is. So that's pretty key too. Expansion and conquest. States did this. They expanded and they conquered. Check out this boss primary source image of the Hittites. They lived in what's now Turkey and what's always Anatolia. And they formed a pretty, well, one of the first early empires there. Can you tell how the Hittites did that based on that picture? Let's see. Well, for one thing, they're an example of people who are favorably situated. Jared Diamond would love that I'm saying this, right? That where you live kind of influences how powerful you are. Because if you're in a place like the Egyptians with this reliably flooding Nile River that waters your crops and gives you lots of surplus barley to eat, or the Assyrians in Mesopotamia, or the Babylonians in Mesopotamia, or the Hittites close to Mesopotamia with control of iron reserves, then yeah, it's a lot easier to expand and take over surrounding states. Because you can have those greater access to resources, as the Hittites did. You have more surplus food to feed a bigger population of soldiers to go conquer other people. You have growing populations, which is good if you're going to expand. And all these new weapons and modes of transportation that make conquering your neighbors easier too. Do you see some new weapons and modes of transportation in this primary source image? What do you see, Felix?
A chariot.
Chariot and
bow and arrow and the horse thingy.
Yeah, a chariot, a bow and arrow, and a horse thingy, right? Chariots are pretty key weapon, if you will, in this time period, right? Because then you can ride all over the place quickly and get to where your enemies are and then kill them. So that's good. And composite bows that you can shoot people with from long distances. You don't even have to run up to them to kill them. You can like from right here, I can kill you. Yeah, exactly. And no wonder that resulted in a lot of that. And often, interestingly, a lot of these new military technologies, chariots, harnesses, stirrups, composite bows, were diffused. The knowledge about them was spread around by what kind of people? Pastoralists, right? Because they're kind of nomadic, wandering around anyway, so they'll bump into you and shoot you with your bow. And if you survive, you're really impressed, and you're like, I want one of those. So the knowledge spreads. Culture played a significant role in unifying these early states and their peoples. What's that an example of? Monumental architecture. This is how you can always tell like who's had Mr. Lang and who's had me. Because if you had Mr. Lang, you're like, oh, theater state. And if you had me, you're like, oh, monumental architecture. It's okay, we can all get along. Monumental architecture and urban planning, that helps unify these states, right? If you can have well-organized cities like the city-states of the Indus River Valley, Mohenjo-Daro, and Harappa, that's good. Monumental architecture really impresses people. I'm not sure the Pharaoh is really the god Osiris, you might say. Are you kidding? Your neighbor says, look where he's buried. Writing, that helps unify people too, because then you can send messages all over the place, and there's a few places where writing like this one, ooh, what kind of writing is that? Cuneiform from Mesopotamia, but writing seems to have emerged spontaneously in Mesopotamia and Egypt and China and the Indus River Valley civilization, though we can't read theirs yet. No one's figured out how to read that writing system. And once you have a writing system, you can write stuff like what to keep people in check? Laws, like Hammurabi's code there, that often did reflect existing hierarchies and facilitated rule. It made it easier to tell people what they should and shouldn't do in your kingdom, and what they should and shouldn't do to, or what would happen to them if they did it to a slave. Actually, not much. You wouldn't get punished much if you hit a slave. Versus an aristocrat. Oh, we'll kill you, right? See how that reflects the existing patriarch or hierarchies, including which one? Slavery and patriarchy, that's right. That's pretty key. Culture, again, new religious beliefs developed, which are going to continue to have strong influence in later periods like this one. Which one is this? Hinduism or the Vedic religions. So remember, this is the origins of Hebrew monotheism, which is going to turn into Judaism later on. Zoroastrianism in Persian civilization, and the Vedic religions, Hinduism. So the key early belief systems of this time period. And all of these belief systems, too, also reflected and in a lot of cases intensified social hierarchies. Hey, how did the Vedic religions intensify social hierarchy? Caste system, good. And finally, this is a time period, too, even by the end of it, where there was the beginnings of the interregional trade that we're going to be paying so much attention to as world history goes on. Interregional cultural and technological, that should say exchanges, groups, sorry about that, but they brought changes, right? For example, trade between Mesopotamian societies here in the Middle East and Indus River Valley civilizations here in South Asia. That's interregional trade that's already happening. So that's an example of it. You can also think about trade between Egypt and Nubia in East Africa, technically, Egypt and North Africa or Middle East. And not only people trading, traveling back and forth with stuff, but some people obviously are still moving to new places and staying there. These large-scale migrations, like the Indo-European migrations towards the end of this era, which spread languages all around Eurasia, which is why the language we're speaking here, English, is actually kind of like Hindi. Have you noticed that before? You will when we watch Lagan. And the Bantu migrations. So that's kind of key too. And that's it for this era. Let's see, we gotta switch to the next era real quick. Yeah, that was a pretty good era, wasn't it? All right, here we go. This is the gray era. Let's start at the beginning. Oh, we will. I have faith. Yay! Okay. So why are these slides going to be purple? It's the classical era. What the hell is what's purple? Does mean royalty, right? It's as we've discussed, it was a hard color of dye to make. So think about you're going to be reminded of the power of states increasing in this time period, the power and wealth of states. What else should we remind us of? Go ahead. Sure. And especially as worn by other elites. What kind of other elites besides political elites should we remember? Religious elites. Maybe Christian priests or Buddhist monks in purple-hued robes. And of course, purple-dyed textiles are always going to be a valuable trade bid in the intensifying trade of this era. Hey, what's a trade bid you should always remember? If anyone asks you textiles. Always remember textiles as a product, a manufactured good. Any era of world history, textiles works. So that's good. So here we go. It's time period 2, 600 BCE to 600 CE. Easiest dates to remember of all. The cause this lame name for it, organization and reorganization of human societies, which I personally think is kind of lame, because that happens in every era. So, oh well. We tend to call it classical age, just for shorthand. Well, sometimes we also use the axial age. Classical age kind of makes sense. How come?
We still use stuff from that.
Yeah, it's old, it's like 2,000 years ago, but it's still relevant. That's kind of the definition of classic, old but still relevant. And again, we're going to kind of look at three big stories, three key concepts in this era. I'm going to not do these in order because I think they make a little more sense in this order. First is about politics, state building. As early states and empires grew in number, size, and population, they frequently competed for resources and came in conflict with one another. So conflict, key in the state building and conflict theme in this era. So kind of the shorthand for this first thing is empires, or second wave civilizations in some cases, key to remember. Here's a kind of handy map of the key states and empires that I'd like you to remember from this time period. So let's take a closer look at this. It's good to remember these and where they were. So if you want to review something from this era, this is a good slide to look at, I think. Let's see. We got the Persian empires in the Middle East, a whole series of dynasties. At their greatest extent, they ruled that red area right there, going all the way back to the 6th century BCE. We got Phoenicia, which is kind of there, that dark blue area, and its colonies. They got these colonies all over the Mediterranean because they sail around and trade stuff. Hey, what do the Phoenicians trade?
Dye purple stuff.
They dye stuff purple with those sails they have. What do they dye? Textiles. You're right. Good. So they're there. It's not an empire. It's kind of a series of colonies, city-states. They want you to remember in that green era there, some more city-states, the Greek city-states, Athens, Sparta, all those guys, Delos. No one talks about Delos enough. The Hellenistic Empire, or to put it another way, Alexander the Great's Macedonian Hellenistic Greek Empire, which did not last very long, but still kind of big, right? That's the yellow outline there. Look, basically his empire was basically just what? It was basically just the Persian Empire, with a little bit of Greece added on, but that's still pretty impressive. Let's see, we got the Roman Empire in the Mediterranean as well. These are all Mediterranean, mostly Mediterranean areas, but other parts of the world have big empires too. Qin and Han China, the Qin dynasty very short, the Han dynasty very long, 400 years and stable in East Asia. Who's in South Asia there? What are those purple areas? Who are they? Yeah, it's the Mauryan and Gupta empires in South Asia. There's actually a long break between those two, but there are these time periods, several centuries, where rulers succeeded in uniting much of South Asia. There are Mauryan and Gupta empires. Are there any empires in the Americas in this time period? Not really, but there are some pretty key societies. We got to remember Teotihuacan and the Mayan city-states in Mesoamerica, and they want to make sure that we remember. Do you remember the folks who made the statues and used drugs and stuff like that? Remember those guys? The Moche civilization. There we go, in the Andes. So there's some key societies to remember in the classical era. And in North America, Chaco civilization, that's in like what states? Not Mississippi. Like New Mexico and Arizona, and then in the Mississippi River Valley, what's often called Cahokia civilization too. So there are key civilizations of the classical era. So, if you're going to rule a larger area, these interregional empires, it's a challenge. You've got to have some good strategies for it. Let's look at some of the strategies. For one thing, they developed new techniques of imperial administration based in part on the success of earlier societies' political forms. If the Mesopotamians made laws and it worked out well, what should we do? We should also make laws and carve them in stone so that everyone can read them and follow them, said the Romans. Copying the success of earlier forms. They created administrative institutions, such as centralized governments, right? One government in the middle that controls the whole territory. They created elaborate legal systems. The Romans had these 12 tablet laws that they put up in the forums, the public areas of all their major cities, so everyone could go read them and see what the rules were. Bureaucracies, these literate government employees, right, who are there to make sure you're following the laws and paying your taxes, and who are there to make sure the roads get built and maintained. All those kinds of things that are key to do. What else did they do? What did they do to boost their economies? Yeah, they issued currencies, right? So all throughout China, wherever back to that time when you want what they have. It's a lot easier to use money than it is to barter and trade, you guys. Building roads so you can travel from place to place with your olive oil or glassware or textiles, you're right. Diplomacy, boosting your economy by having good relations with your neighbors. The Han Dynasty, of course, the ones that we usually credit for kicking off that Chinese treaty system. Hey, nomads, you got access to good furs and horses. We'll trade with you provided you acknowledge our superiority and pay us some tribute. Okay, say the nomads, and the economy grows. How do they defend themselves? How do they conquer other places, these large empires? Well, what's one thing they do? They build walls, and that's kind of key. They develop supply lines so they can quickly get food and supplies and weapons to their military, whether they're fighting against the Persians or the Germanic barbarians or whatever. They built fortifications and defensive walls. This happens to be Hadrian's Wall in present-day Britain, at the very northern edge of the Roman Empire, built to keep the Scots out. And of course, China had a great wall, so they say. And drawing new groups of soldiers from local or conquered populations, right? This is a good way to defend yourself and expand, right? When you conquer people, don't just slaughter and enslave them. Let them join your military and gain status and wealth that way. That's what the Romans did, and it worked out pretty well for several hundred years, recruiting soldiers from all the people they conquered, like the Greeks and the Carthaginians and the Egyptians and so forth. Let's see. You lived in one of these big empires. What was life like? What were some of the key aspects of life? Well, one thing was big cities, right? These big empires were big into big cities. Imperial cities like Persepolis there. It's a ruin now, but it was a big city back 2,000 years ago. So let's keep in mind the role of imperial cities, which served as centers for all kinds of activities. Let's see. What kind of things would happen in imperial cities? Yes, they serve as centers for trade, as seen in that Roman market up there. They serve as centers for public performance of rituals. If you have Mr. Lang, you call this what? Yeah, the theater state practices, right? Where the rulers would do these elaborate rituals. If you're in my class, you're like, we never talked about that. And you're right. Political administration, of course, the capital city is where the emperor is and where the head bureaucrats are and where the head of the military is and where they send orders out from that they can all talk to each other about, so that's pretty key. What are some other aspects of life in these large-scale societies, these empires? Well, there's a lot of hierarchy. In fact, you could say hierarchy. Oh, come on. You could say hierarchy. Yeah, please. Can more of you say that? You can say hierarchy. Intensify. Thank you. Thank you, Mariana and Mila, for being on the leading edge of that one. Cultivators, right? So you kind of keep in mind these varied, of course, from place to place, but some kind of generic social groups in these large-scale empires and civilizations. Cultivators or peasants. There's a primary source image of some Roman peasants there. That looks like some kind of early horse-drawn bulldozer. I don't know what that is, but they're cultivating there. Laborers, people who do the common work in the city, the building, the cleaning up garbage and poop. There's a lot of poop cleanup in cities in those days. Slaves, not all empires. In fact, arguably not most empires had a large-scale slavery, but one of them sure did. Yeah, the Roman Empire. Artisans, people who make goods that require skill to make, like metal goods or glassware or textiles. Merchants who buy and sell all this stuff, kind of their own class, and elites of various sorts. Military elites, religious elites, political elites. These empires had elites. And in one case, too, caste groups. There's very formalized rules about what group you're in and who you can marry and who you can even eat with and what your status is. What region is that caste group from? South Asian caste system. Good. Let's see. How did they get all this work done? I mean, it's a lot of work to run an empire and feed 1 million people alone in the city of Rome. How do you do that? Well, you rely on a range of methods to maintain the production of food, right? People get mad if they're starving and they might rebel against your rules, so you want to make sure people are well fed. And provide rewards for the loyalty of the elites. If you're ruling an empire, you want to keep the aristocrats and the religious elites and the military elites, you want to keep them on side. So you got to do things to keep the elites on your team if you're ruling an empire. So what kind of solutions can you come up with for this? For the work that needs to be done and the loyalty you need to buy? Well, you can do this. What's that? Tom, explain what's Corvée labor. Katie Park. That's right. It's like making people, common people, work for the state, work for the government, usually for certain times of the year. So we need to build this big wall. You've got the Xiongnu, and it's winter time, so the rice isn't growing anyway. You're going to come north and you're going to work on this wall with us. Corvée labor. Rents and tributes. No, that says tributes. It should say tributes. Rents and tributes, right? So rent's what you pay to live on someone's farm or someone's big estate that you pay to them. Tributes, right, from other societies that help create wealth that you can then give to the elites. The Xiongnu bring you a bunch of nice furs. Well, you, Emperor, then in turn give the furs to the high-ranking bureaucrats and elites and aristocrats and keep them on your team. That's kind of interesting. Even slavery, especially the Roman Empire, was used as a reward, right? If you were a military commander and you conquered a people, what did you get to do with those people? You could enslave them and put them to work in your household or on your farm or your estate, right? Like is shown in that primary source mosaic there. There's Miro, he's enslaved. There's Fructus, right next to him. He's not enslaved. Which one is the elite? I bet you can tell. Let's see. And one other form of social hierarchy intensified. That's right. In a lot of places, patriarchy continued to shape gender and family relations in imperial societies, especially China in this time period, because of a certain belief system we'll talk about in just a moment. This is a portrait from Pompeii. Remember Pompeii, that Roman city that got buried by volcanic eruption? Yeah. Good volcanic eruption videos. You should do that again. One more time. There, good. And this is from a house. It's called Terentius Neo and his wife. Wait, she doesn't have a name. That's patriarchy, right, in action. So let's see. Now, the second key concept of this era we're going to keep in mind is this continuing intensification of interregional interactions, especially trade, leading to cultural and technological exchange as well. This is one of our continuities in world history. At every era, there's more exchange, more interregional exchange than there was before. And this era is no exception. So kind of the key concept of trade. Why did long-distance communication and exchange intensify in this time period? Kind of every era has a different answer to this question. Why did interregional trade intensify? For the Turtle era, it has to do with some new technologies. Stirrups, for example. What are stirrups? Yeah, those loops that you put your feet in that keep you on the horse or the camel, right? And that makes long-distance travel easier. And as more and more people in this era have access to stirrups, it makes it easier for you to travel with your pack animals like horses and camels and donkeys over long distances. And that leads to which trade route? Silk Road. That's going to be pretty key for the next two eras there. But not just by land, by sea as well. There's new maritime technologies. Name one. Dhows with their what kind of sails? Lateen sails that enable you to tack into the wind, as well as advanced knowledge of the monsoon winds on the Indian Ocean. How you can easily sail where at what time of year. That stimulated exchanges all the way from East Asia here to East Africa there. Basically the beginning of this era of the Indian Ocean trade network as we're going to know it for the next several eras. So that's a big deal. And besides trade goods, like what else traveled along these trade routes? Religious beliefs, yeah. That's pretty key. We'll get to that in just a moment. Other things? Well, those are trade goods. People often travel along them too. What else? Yeah, ideas. Now, this is a key point I think students have trouble with often. It's important to keep in mind, in especially the early eras, what was traded along trade routes. Like we produce it here. And then we carry it over here and we sell it to this person here. And then we go back here and we make some more of it, right? Persia, and we trade it for some furs. And then we take the furs back to China. That's trade versus diffusion. Diffusion is different. Diffusion is this. Diffusion is here in Vietnam, we know how to grow, what kind of rice is that? Here we know how to grow champa rice, and we then take the seeds to China, and here people learn how to plant and grow the seeds. And they keep doing it. That's diffusion. Do you see the difference? Good. Because that's key. People are not trading champa rice. The Vietnamese were not sending boatloads of rice to China every year, because that's silly. They can grow it in China. But they were trading silk. But this is tricky, because silk making technology, of course, is eventually going to diffuse. People in the Byzantine Empire, for example, are going to figure out how to make silk themselves, and then just stay here and make it themselves. That's diffusion versus trade. Get it? Good. Okay, so this is talking about diffusion. Cross-diffuse. Rice and cotton from South Asia going to the Middle East, for example. What else diffused? What kind of technology? Irrigation technology. Anyone remember what this thing is? This clever idea where you drill a hole in the side of the hill?
Kanat.
It's a kanat, you're right. You cannot forget that. As an example of new farming and irrigation techniques that are diffusing. No one ever carried a kanat from Persia to Spain. It wasn't traded. The technology diffused. Good. And what else? Diseases, yeah. And this is where we see really the first appearance on the world stage of a disease that's going to be pretty key for us for many eras to come. Which one? Smallpox. Because it is towards the end of this era, around 200 CE, that the first massive outbreak of smallpox develops first probably in China, but then it spreads pretty quickly along the Silk Roads, devastating the Han Dynasty's Chinese Empire and the Roman Empire as well, contributing to their declines. So there's some other things, but as Jason pointed out, probably the key thing that diffused that we should remember in this time period are these things. Which brings us to our final key concept of this era. As states and empires increased in size and contact between regions intensified, human communities transformed their religious and ideological beliefs and practices. We're talking here about belief systems, basically. Our third big story to track in the classical era. So let's look at some, shall we? Some of these were old belief systems that were kind of reworked. For example, which one? Judaism. Yeah, that's an old belief system, at least close to 4,000 years old. However, it's in this time period that it takes on its present form. Codification of the Hebrew scriptures into the Torah, the modern version of the Hebrew Bible, if you will. That happens in this era. What else happens? They bring in a lot of other surrounding traditions into the practices and the traditions of Judaism, Mesopotamian culture, and legal traditions, for example. A lot of scholars argue that the Ten Commandments were actually adopted in part from the Code of Hammurabi. Interesting, huh? Or that story of Noah and the flood. It's just a coincidence that lots of Mesopotamian mythologies have the same story. Maybe, or maybe just people are afraid of floods, who knows. But there's some strong arguments there. And, you know, the Jews are kind of unique in that they never have the protection of a massive state or empire, unlike Christianity in the Roman Empire, unlike Zoroastrianism in the Persian Empire, unlike Buddhism during the Mauryan Empire. They never have the protection of a large state or empire, so they're often conquered by their neighbors. And when that happens, they're often forced to move around and flee and go to other places. So even in this time period, we see the beginning of what's going to be a phenomenon for 2,000 years, the Jewish diaspora, leaving from the Jewish homeland. Oops, I want to go back there. Leaving from the Jewish homeland around Jerusalem there, and spreading throughout the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, religions are Hinduism, and we see multiple manifestations of Brahman. A lot of religious scholars argue that Hinduism started out, the Vedic religion started out a more traditional polytheistic belief system. And it's in this era where the idea of there actually being sort of one spiritual force at work in the universe, Brahman, and that really all the different gods are representations, avatars, different representations of Brahman. A lot of religious historians say, well, that's something that really started in this era, that Hinduism becomes a monistic religion. And I know my students, some of you encountered this term monistic on your early modern era exam. And that's what it means here. Kind of a key point there. New teachings about Dharma and reincarnation, partly in response to Buddhism, which we'll talk about later. New teachings about, it doesn't matter. You don't just maybe get to escape the cycle of death and rebirth by working right up to the caste system. Maybe you also escape the cycle of death and rebirth by doing the right moral things in life too. And further development of the social and political roles of the South Asian caste system. Again, kind of reinforced and codified by the Vedic religions, the belief systems we now call Hinduism. Let's see, we got any other ones? Oh, no, because there's new belief systems that spread, often asserting universal truths. That's why we often call a lot of these belief systems universal religions. Here's one of them. Which one is this representing?
Buddhism.
That's right. Of course, it starts with the life of Siddhartha Gautama, minor royalty in a minor northern South Asian state around the year 500 BCE. And of course, growing up in a largely Vedic kind of society, a lot of the beliefs of Buddhism that Siddhartha Gautama preached they reflect Vedic beliefs as well. The whole cycle of death and rebirth, or reincarnation. But there were also a lot of things that were in reaction to traditional Vedic beliefs, like the Buddha's rejection of the caste system, for example. The religion spread pretty rapidly, Buddhism did, from its start, throughout South Asia, and then beyond to Central Asia and East Asia. And these are kind of some patterns we see with the spread of a lot of religions historically. And that there's kind of three key kinds of actors who help the religion spread. What are the three key kinds of actors? Merchants, missionaries, and rulers, like Ashoka. I think they want you to know who Ashoka was. I think they want you to know that he was a ruler of the Mauryan Empire who was a state sponsor of Buddhism in that time and place. So that's kind of key. And as it spread, not surprisingly, and interacted with other local cultures in East Asia, for example, where there's a strong tradition of ancestor worship, right? This idea that people who are dead can still have spiritual power on earth to help you out. Buddhism adapted and turned into different schools or sects. Mahayana Buddhism in East Asia, for example, with bodhisattvas. You know, these actual humans who live, but now they're dead, but they still have the power to help you out spiritually on earth. That's kind of a key example of Buddhism changing as it spread throughout Asia. Do you remember that question in the practice exam? Some of you answered that question. You did a good job, a lot of you. What's this belief system represented here? Can you tell? It is Confucianism. Look at that. So Confucius, or Confucius, around the year 500 BCE, and then a lot of disciples or followers who came later who continued to add on to and modify the original teachings of Confucius over time. And really, in its core, Confucianism was all about social harmony and trying to build a fairer, better society for all of us by people following their proper relationships, those 5 relationships that we talked about in class, including this one. Can you tell what relationship is being shown? And this is actually a Song Dynasty, so not classical era, but still a really old painting. Yeah, filial piety, respect for your parents, from the Latin word filius, or son. Right, so remember that, because tomorrow is Mother's Day. Right, so you better show some filial piety there. And proper rituals, perhaps like that one, and relationships for all people in China. Keep in mind, Confucianism, the original form of it, is not a religion. There's no deities. It doesn't tell you anything about the afterlife. It's really a philosophy focused on this life, here and now. Let's see what else we have. Oh, this one, Taoism. There we go. There's our Taoist arts. The core belief of Taoism really this belief in balance between humans and nature, which in a way I think shows how urbanized and how technologically advanced China was at this time period, right? Because before you can react against humans not being in harmony with nature, humans have to not be in harmony with nature, right? Living in large cities and with a lot of technology. But Taoism said, no, back to nature. Smaller communities are better. Live in balance. That is the way. That is the Tao. And this tradition, which of course continues to this day, not just in China but beyond, has a lot of influence in terms of poetry about nature, medical theories and practices, doing acupuncture to get yourself back in balance, the arts and architecture about nature, right? So that's the kind of key thing to remember. Oh, which one is this one? Greek rationalism. Also, not a religion, right? Because it itself did not have any teachings about the afterlife, really, or divine divinities, but more of a mindset, right? Kind of an early form of this mindset saying that all of us humans have reason. We all can use logic to understand and solve the problems in the world around us by using observations in our own minds, and that humans all have inherent value because of this, unless they're female or enslaved. So the workings of the natural world, we can actually use investigation, empirical methods to investigate and understand the natural world, for example, and even the geometric underlying of the universe around us, politics and human societies. People like the philosopher Plato can write books about what the ideal form of government would be and how that would work well, and the nature of the divine, right? Even though it wasn't itself a belief system, you could use this to kind of rationally think through, are there gods, and if so, what do they want for us to do, that kind of thing. Which brings us to this guy, and our next new belief system, what? Christianity. There he is, Jesus of Nazareth, who lived on earth about 2,000 years ago, was honored by his followers as the Son of God, but also part of God, because it's the Trinity, it's Christianity, it's confusing, but apparently it's popular, because it's the world's largest religion. And so Jesus lived, according to the stories, about 32 years and walked around, and in the last 3 years of that life, taught all people a lot of stuff. And that stuff was written down and turned into Christianity. But obviously, Jesus himself was Jewish, so he's the same Jewish God is still Yahweh that Christians worship and honor, and a lot of the same beliefs about the afterlife and the same Ten Commandments in Christianity, for example, but also Hellenistic traditions too. A lot of Jesus' earlier followers were Hellenized. In other words, they bought into Greek culture. They spoke Greek. Paul of Tarsus, for example, who wrote most of the New Testament, was a Hellenized Jew, so he spoke and wrote in Greek, and actually used a lot of Greek kind of rational arguments to try to convince people to become Christian. And although it was first condemned early on by the Roman government, because Jesus said, that you should only honor the government to a certain extent, and that no, the Roman emperor is not a god. Eventually, it was sanctioned by the Roman Empire around the year 300 CE, became a state religion, and it also spread, and also through the work of merchants, missionaries, and some of whom even count as early saints in Christianity, like Paul of Tarsus. So he spread of Christianity there as well. Now, often these belief systems, which are pretty powerful in people's minds, reflected a lot in works of art. Let's see. What belief system is reflected in this statue of this naked guy who looks pretty amazing? No, that's not a belief system. That's a piece of... Yeah, Greek rationalism, right? If humans are really wonderful and the pinnacle of creation, why not make statues of them all naked so we can see them in their full glory? Let's see. Whoa, what does that art represent? Buddhism. Interesting to remember, though, of course, that for about the first 500 years or so of Buddhism, people didn't really make statues of the Buddha. That came later. But when it came later, boy, did it come later. And now statues of the Buddha are a big part of Buddhism, and that goes back to the classical era as well. I know, we looked at this one already, but what belief system? Taoism, in these arts and architecture here. But we're coming to the end here now. Oh, not quite yet. We do have to talk about religions and social hierarchies. Let's do that briefly. Because a lot of these religious belief systems did, in fact, also back up the social social hierarchies that existed at the time. But not always. Sometimes they shook up social hierarchies a little bit too. Let's take a look at that. Oh, Cynthia's here. Can you all applaud for Cynthia because she's doing rough stuff? Thank you, Cynthia. We looked at this one before. What kind of hierarchy is being backed up by what belief system in this picture? Confucianism is backing up. You kind of say ageism, right? Respect for your elders, which is a form of hierarchy. Of course, Confucianism is also a big supporter of what form of social hierarchy? Patriarchy as well. So Confucianism emphasizing filial piety and patriarchy. But in some religious traditions, things were shooken up. Whoa, look at these women, actually. Can you tell that they have high status because they're wearing silk robes that are dyed fancy colors? Dang! What are they? Buddhist nuns, that's right. So Buddhists and Christians, men and women could gain status through monastic life, this kind of lifestyle where you became a monk or a nun and kind of gave up your worldly life to devote yourself entirely to the practice of and the teaching of your faith. That's a big deal in these. All right, it's time to wrap up this era because we've been in this era for a little while now. So let's wrap up this era and take a look at this. Oh no, I still have to say this. I do have to say that some older religious and cultural traditions continue, right? So you got to remember things that went back way to the Neolithic time. People are still doing these faiths as well. Let's see, what old religious traditions should this remind us of perhaps? This shrine in a house in southern China. Yeah, so we got to remember ancestor veneration, right? In many societies, including China. The idea, you look like you have food in your hand. You in the black who just walked in. You look like you have food in your hand. Yeah, you need to leave outside. Walk back out.
Yeah, walk out.
Okay? So that's still a thing, right? The belief that your dead ancestors still have spiritual power and can help you out. Let's see, shamanism, this belief where certain humans, called shamans in English, are thought to be able to communicate with the supernatural world and use spiritual power that way and help from the gods and the divinities. And then animism, right? This idea that different elements of the natural world also have spiritual power. Mountains, certain kinds of animals, rivers are all divine in certain ways. Many societies from Australia to North America, people still follow these kinds of religious beliefs. And a lot of times, these even older beliefs get incorporated into new belief systems as well. It is almost certain that Jesus of Nazareth was born in the summertime, because when else would his family be traveling around? They would not be traveling around the Roman Empire in the middle of winter. And yet, we celebrate Christmas in December, because early on church authorities thought, hey, why don't we tie this belief system and our celebrations into even older pagan belief systems that had this like party at the winter solstice every year, where they brought trees into their houses, and that's why we have Christmas trees. Interesting, huh? So older beliefs kind of being rolled into newer beliefs in a lot of cases. Okay, now it's time for the end of the era. Nothing says decline and collapse, like a decline and collapse aqueduct there. So let's take a look at this. Remember that as time went on, these key empires, the Roman Empire, Han Empire, Persian Empire, Mauryan Empire, Gupta Empire, and all these new ones, they encountered difficulties and could not manage, which eventually led to decline. You know, some of these empires, like the Eastern Roman Empire, were still there, but they were, less powerful or smaller than they were. Collapse in the case of Han Dynasty China and the Mauryan and Gupta empires. Or transformation into successor states. The Han Dynasty, that area of China is eventually reconstituted, put back together by the Sui rulers in the Sui China. The Byzantine Empire is kind of an extension of the Roman Empire. You could also call it a successor state. And the Caliphate, which comes along and takes over most of what used to be the Persian Empire. And why did all this happen? What are some key causes of these collapses? Let's remember this. When you have a lot of people who are, very poor and very enslaved, what's going to be their level of loyalty to the state that rules them? Could be pretty low. So that's going to be an issue if you concentrate a lot of wealth in the hands of a few, that the masses of the population that you want to be loyal to you, maybe aren't going to be so loyal to you as a ruler. Let's see what else the Romans run into in terms of trouble. Yeah, Germanic invaders. So a lot of these empires encountering security issues along their frontiers. The Huns, who invade the Roman Empire and Han Dynasty China. Wow, that's pretty impressive. The Germanic peoples who are moving into and attacking and invading the Roman Empire, and the Xiongnu and other nomads that are putting pressure on Han Dynasty do lead to the collapse of these things. And then, of course, what's the other factor that leads to the collapse of a lot of these societies? Disease. So there we go. And that's it for this era. I think we should take a break. Let's take